a living entity who has possible for life. Aksarasya prashasane ghargi surya chandra masao vridito tishtataha. Quote, my dear Gargi, everything is under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even the sun, the moon, and other controllers and demigods like Lord Brahma and King Indra are all under his control. End quote. An ordinary human being or animal who has accepted a material body cannot go beyond the jurisdiction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's control. A material body includes senses. However, the sense activities of so-called scientists who try to be free from God's law or the laws of nature are useless. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7:14, Mama Maya Dharatyaya. It is impossible to surpass the control of material nature, for the Supreme Personality of Godhead is working behind it. Sometimes we are proud of our austerities, penance, and mystic yogic powers, but it is clearly stated herein that one cannot surpass the laws and directions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, either by dint of mystic power, a scientific education, or austerities and penances. It is impossible. The word manishaya, by intelligence, is of special significance. Priyavrata might argue that Lord Brahma was requesting him to accept family life and the responsibility for ruling a kingdom, although Narada Muni had advised him not to enter household life and be entangled in material affairs. Whom to accept will be a puzzle for Priyavrata, because both Lord Brahma and Narada Muni are authorities. Under these circumstances, the use of the word manishaya is very appropriate, for it indicates that since both Narada Muni and Lord Brahma are authorized to give instruction, Priyavrata should neglect neither of them, but should use his intelligence to follow the advice of both. To solve such dilemmas, Srila Rupa Goswami has given a very clear conception of intelligence. He says, Anansak tasha vishayan, yatarham upanyunjataha, nirbandha krishna sambandhe, yuktam vairagyam uchate. Vishayan, material affairs, should be accepted without attachment, and everything should be dovetailed with the service of the Lord. That is real intelligence, manisha. Becoming a family man or king in the material world is not harmful if one accepts everything for Krishna's service. That necessitates clear intelligence. Mayavadi philosophers say, Brahma Satyam Jaga Mitya. This material world is false, and only the absolute truth is real. However, an intelligent devotee in the line of Lord Brahma and the great sage Narada, or in other words, in the Brahma Sampradaya, does not consider this world false. That which is created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be false, but using it for enjoyment is. Everything is meant to be enjoyed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 5:29, Bhoktaram Jagnatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Supreme Proprietor and Enjoyer, and therefore everything should be dovetailed for His enjoyment and service. Regardless of one's circumstances, favorable or unfavorable, one should use everything to serve the Supreme Lord. That is a perfect way to use one's intelligence. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Agyanjmirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Bolo. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyarevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, a little spontaneity here. Hare Krishna. So, Lord Brahma has come to Priyavrata as a representative of the Supreme Lord. He has informed, we were hearing, Priyavrata, that he is not simply presenting his opinion, but rather giving the authority of the Supreme Lord. And now he's explaining that the authority of the Supreme Lord cannot be, transgressed or challenged. What's another word? I'm looking for a word that begins with a D. Defied. No, I was looking for the word defied. What did you say? Disobeyed. I like that. The authority of the Supreme Lord cannot be defied. The idea here is that you can either follow the authority of the Lord as a free citizen or follow the authority of the Lord as a prisoner. Just like someone can say, oh, I don't follow the law, I do what I want. And then he runs the red light and he's stopped by the police. And he tells the police, why are you stopping me? I do as I like. And the police says, oh, really? And then he takes him to jail. So you can either follow as a free citizen or you can follow as a prisoner. And the more one tries or is under the false impression that one can disobey the authority of the Lord, then the more the, let's say, authority of the Lord's energies starts to restrict the movements of the living entity. We were hearing, I think, Amala Prabhu was explaining this also. Just like you go to prison on account of disobeying the law. And then if in the prison you disobey the law further, then there is further restriction. And you're put into solitary confinement and so on. So the more one is under the illusion that they can defy the authority of the Lord, the more the Lord's energies restricts the movement of the living entity. So therefore they get lower and lower forms of life on account of their disobedience of the authority of the Lord. So one can follow as a free citizen, or one can follow as a prisoner who's being more and more restricted. But everyone has to follow. It is not possible to actually transgress the authority of the Lord. For those who are, tanubrit, for those who have accepted material bodies, then they are under the stringent laws of the material nature, the modes of material nature which cannot be surpassed. Why can they not be surpassed? Because they are divinely empowered. Daiviyesha gunamayi mamamaya dharatya. Daiviyesha means divinely empowered. So the material energy, although the living entity is superior in terms of being conscious and the material energy isn't, still, because it's divinely empowered or being directed by the Supreme Lord. What is that other verse in Bhagavad Gita? Maya yakshena prakritihi suyachesas characharam. Because it's under the direction of the Supreme Lord, who no one can challenge. Therefore, how can one think to surpass the influence of the material energy? One may think themselves capable on account of various qualifications. So some of those qualifications are mentioned here. One has strength and the performance of severe austerities, an exalted Vedic education, the power of mystic yoga, physical prowess, very strong intellectual activities. Even with all such merits, one cannot actually surpass the energy of the Supreme Lord. And the attempt to try to figure out some way of being freed from the influence of the material nature that's not in line with how Krishna is saying that can be done, then that's going to bind the living entity more and more and more. That's called karma bandhanaha. This is, so Prabhupada is giving the example of scientists. It is a fact that everyone in the material world is trying to free themselves from the restrictions of the material nature. Everyone is trying to do that. That's a fact. So someone in walking to the store, so someone made a car, right? And the whole idea is that to defy the limitations that's been forced upon them. in the form of a very slow body, that has to walk to the store. Suppose someone is like, I don't know who was the first person to make a car. Suppose he was super fat, so he was walking is too much. So in order to free himself from that imposition of the material nature, he created a car. Someone wanted to speak Prajalpa long distance, so someone thought of a computer. First it was phones, and the phones were like, you had to like turn it around like this, and it would take a long time, and someone said, this is a real big imposition of my sense gratification. So then they came up with a newer way where you could just dial it like this. And then they said, this is still not fast enough, and then they came up with G-Chat. So in this way, the whole idea of everyone in the material existence is how to be free from the restrictions that material nature is posing on them. Someone thought, wow, I wish I could fly like a bird, so someone came up with an airplane, right? Otherwise, you would have to be satisfied with the Maya you were born in, right? I was born in this type of Maya, boss, this is what my life is. But, especially in Kali Yuga, no one is ever satisfied with the Maya that they're in. So then they create more and more forms of diluting energy, and that way they become more and more bewildered. But the whole idea is freedom. That is natural for the soul. He wants to experience freedom. He doesn't like to be restricted in any way. And therefore, he is naturally compelled to try to come up with a program for getting freedom. But if he tries to do that without following the advice of the Lord, then rather than get freedom, he gets more and more bound up by the material energy. So Krishna understands the living entity wants that freedom, but there's an authorized way of getting it, and there's an unauthorized way of getting it. Prahlad Maharaj prays, Jasmat priya priya viyoga samyoga janma, shokaknina sakala yoni shuddhahyamana, dugoshadam tarapidukam atadiyaham bhumam brahmami vadame tavadasu yogam. He explains this, in this material world, I'm always, coming together and being separated from pleasing and displeasing circumstances. We have experience of this. The circumstances that are very pleasing to us, separation. And the circumstances that are very displeasing to us, we are brought together very nicely. So as a result, on account of this experience, the living entity in the material world's heart is always being burned in the fire of lamentation. Shoka agnina, dahyamana, his burning and lamentation, naturally, right? The things that I really like, what's the things we really like? What can we say? So many things. Like you join the Krishna consciousness movement, and someone may be attached to intoxication and illicit sex, and then he wants to be a serious devotee, and then he's separated. And his heart feels very heavy. In fact, when I remember reading, when you read things like this, there's no love in the material world, four regulative principles, one's heart feels very heavy. One feels a very heavy weight on the back. One gentleman who had come for the first time to our Ratha Yatra festival, he came the day before to help out with Cut Up, and I had spoken to him. Very nice, very simple, like village man from India. And he became very inspired, took the Bhagavad Gita, started chanting rounds. He was very, very inspired. And then we would talk sometimes during the week through Skype. So he said, Prabhuji, I have a question about the four regulative principles. I said, especially one of them, isn't it? and he said, yes, Prabhuji, no need to guess, it's obvious. And he was having a discussion with his wife. She was in India. And she was she said, why did you get married if you're going to follow the four regs? That was her whole, understanding. Anyway, so one is separated from things one considers most dear and brought together to things that is not very dear. Like, temple president, some type of authority is very unpleasant, temple commander, like that. It's something a very unpleasant experience, right? Authority. Anything that's an authority, the living entity doesn't like because of his recalcitrant nature. So on account of this, his heart is always burning lamentation. So he tries to come up with a remedy for that, naturally. That's the natural symptom of the soul. Dugoshadam tarapidukam atadiyaham, Prahlad Maharaj says, but all the remedies he come up with are more problematic than the original problem. And this is the dilemma, because you can't solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it. And it's simple logic. Atadiyaham, Prahlad Maharaj says that. Because they're in the bodily concept of life, and it's that concept that has caused the problem, and then with that conception maintained, they're trying to solve the problem. Atadiyaham, do it from the bodily platform. And therefore, they're meeting with greater and greater misery. I'm sure we have experience of this. It's just like when you want to get out of a particular situation, you tell a lie. And in order to protect that lie, you got to tell some more lies. In order to, make sure that you don't get caught, you got to tell some more lies. And then you get kind of bewildered. Wait, which one? What lie did I tell you? Okay, yeah. So then it gets more and more complicated, bewildering. So in a parallel kind of way, we try to get freedom from the restrictions of the material nature, but our attempts create more and more complications. We become more and more entangled. So then Prahlad Maharaj says, therefore, my dear Lord, O Great One, I'm approaching you and asking about information about your devotional service, Tavadasa Yogam, because I understand only by devotional service I can actually gain freedom. So it is natural the soul wants to be free, but there's an authorized way to do it. And no one can surpass the authority of the Lord. So you can accept the authorized way of doing it, or you cannot accept, but in either case, you have to follow. You can follow directly as a free citizen, or you can follow indirectly as a prisoner, but you have to follow. So if we want to satisfy our desire for experience greater freedom, both internally and externally, then it can actually happen by following the advice of the Supreme Lord. That is a simple point. Just like the Supreme Lord makes a whole system for governing the material universe. So if someone follows that, then they'll actually be happy. For example, someone wants to enjoy material sense gratification. The Lord is not envious. Okay, you want to enjoy sense gratification? I have no problem with that. He created a whole system which involved cooperation between humans and the devas, so you can enjoy your sense gratification. And you'll actually enjoy it, but I don't want to do it like that. I want to do it my own way. Oh, your own way. You very unintelligently just drink a lot of booze and all these things. Modern Kali Yuga program for sense gratification. Are they getting more enjoyment out of it? I was just in New York for 10 days. The city's so ugly. How's an enjoyment? They don't know how to enjoy. They just drink. I saw they go to the bar for enjoying, right? Nice, go to the bar, you speak a lot of prajalpa and nonsense, and you enjoy, right? 4 o'clock in the morning, huge brawl broke out. 50 people in the street. All the cars were stuck up. They couldn't move. A huge brawl at 4 o'clock in the morning. I went downstairs to chant my japa. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. All of a sudden I heard, ah! I was like, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. It was Saturday night, or Sunday morning, rather. I'm like, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. So naturally, the ears pulled me over to the window to see what was going on. And then, a huge brawl in the middle of the street, 50 people fighting. So that means they don't know how to enjoy. This is the evidence. There's evidence, solid evidence you don't know how to enjoy. Unless they're taking that to be enjoyment. Sometimes you get like a huge headache from drinking, I hear. They call it the hangover. Amala Bhakta was discussing this the other day. And you have to sleep on the ground. And one says, man, that was a great time. This is how bewildered the conditioned jiva is. See, now, where is the enjoyment? Then it goes on and on like this in the misconception. Then his old life, he really understands his suffering condition, how he's wasted his human form of life. So the first paragraph is dealing with that idea that all living entities want to experience freedom. That is natural, because our natural situation is a state of freedom. In the material world, we're dealing with a lot of Krishna's energies, and we're dependent upon those energies also. So it will behoove the conditioned soul, especially, to exchange with those energies the way the Supreme Lord has ordained. And that way he gets a wholesome situation for himself. But if he tries to interact with the energies in his own mentally concocted way, thinking I'm so qualified by dint of my austerities and mystic yoga, etc., then he'll find himself more and more baffled and bewildered and unhappy. So it is the only difficulty in the positive program of following the Supreme Lord's advice is false ego. This is the only dilemma. If somehow or other we can culture a sufficient amount of humility to put aside our egoistic ways of doing things and just accept the Supreme Lord's authority as it is coming down through various authorities, then we can be happy. So it is no small task, of course, to, tame the false ego. Sit down, boy. There's no small task. So this is the only obstacle. And if you follow the Supreme Lord's order, definitely we'll be happy. Only one obstacle is there, that is ahankar. One has to be, this is what spirituality is all about. Taming that maha false ego. Jiva is this big, not even this big, huh? Jiva is so small, you cannot see also. But his ego, when he walks into the room, you don't have any space in the room. You have to get, pushed out. Like Prabhupada tells the story of the big fat Bengali lady. This story is a famous story. The one man is sitting there, and just a little space on the seat. And one little old man is looking there like, I'm old, you give me a seat. At first he's like, I'm not going to show any mercy, And then the old man's looking pathetic enough, so he's like, okay, I'll squeeze over. And then he sits down, and then he calls his, 3 or 4 kids and his big fat Bengali wife. And then you totally pushed off the seat. So similarly, our false egos are like a big fat Bengali wife, They're taking up all the room, And as a result, not able to follow the Supreme Lord's order. It is, of course, we're making it a little playful, but the actual situation is quite sad and heartbreaking. That actually we want freedom, we want happiness, and it can be easily obtained, but it's this one little thing that's blocking us. We're puffed up. So although we can joke about it in various ways to make the pill easier to swallow, the actual situation is that it's quite heartbreaking. That this is the dilemma, and then birth after birth, this is going on. So then in the second paragraph, we have an interesting dilemma. Priyavrata might argue, well, you say that you're representing the authority of the Lord, but Narada Muni is also a representative of the authority of the Lord. And you're giving one type of direction, and Narada Muni is giving completely, apparently, contradictory direction. So who am I supposed to follow? And if I have to choose my own particular predilection, then I'm going with Narada Muni because I'm not into the whole householder thing and so on. And he's also an authority of the Lord. He's also representing the authority of the Lord. One who represents the absolute truth is called an authority. That is the definition of authority. Not that someone has the position of authority, but he must represent the absolute truth. So both are representing the absolute truth, but they're giving apparently diametrically opposed directions. So what to do? So Prabhupada's mood here is that one has to be intelligent to do both. That's what he's saying here, Manishaya. One should be very intelligent to figure out how to follow both. How to be a householder and a brahmachari at the same time. In context, I'm being a little playful. One has to be intelligent to do both. So Srila Prabhupada says it is easily achieved. In context of Priyavrata's particular dilemma, what is his dilemma? If I accept a household situation, I will become more and more materially entangled. That's what he's thinking. And therefore, I'm preferring a more renounced position. How do I reconcile both of these various situations as one wholesome program for spiritual development? So then, for that, Srila Prabhupada has quoted Rupa Goswami's Ananta Yukta Vairagyam verse. It is easily achieved by the understanding that, number one, no one can renounce anything because nothing belongs to the living entity. You cannot walk up to someone and say, I renounce your wife. Excuse me? Those sound like fighting words. You can't say that. So when there's a discussion of renunciation, it just really means renouncing the misconceived notion that I have some proprietorship over any of Krishna's energies. That's all it means. So this is what we're hearing now in Chapter 5 of Bhagavad Gita. We're also studying that. That's the whole idea. Renunciation simply means renouncing a misconception. So Anand Saktasha Vishayan Prabhupada says means material affairs. So one can accept a material situation without being attached or averse to it. Aversion being the opposite side of attachment. One can accept that situation, not attached, not averse. Yatarham upanyunjata nirbandha Krishna sambandhe. According to its use in relationship to Krishna, seeing everything has its potential and the utility of the service of Krishna. Everything. Because everything in the material world and spiritual world is paraphernalia meant for Krishna's enjoyment. So everything has its potential to be utilized in Krishna's service. Every little aspect, practically speaking, of the material existence has its utility in relationship to the Lord. But that doesn't mean that an individual should use everything and then say, Yuta Vairagam Uchite. I often joke, going to Best Buy and then going Yuta Vairagam Uchite. And then here's a sound around system. I think I need that. Here's a new iPhone 4, 5, 6. I think I need that. Yuta Vairagam Uchite, No, Yuta Vairagam Uchite does not mean everything can be used. Yuta Vairagam Uchite, everything can be used in Krishna service. There's a little subtlety there, Everything can be used. Everything can be used in Krishna service. It's a little subtle, not too subtle, But generally, the conditioned souls, we are often easily deluded. We suffer from a disease called self-delusion. And therefore, we may easily, in the name of Yuta Vairagam, find ourselves interfacing with the material energy, which is more and more entangling. Because the main qualification, the two aspects of the qualification here, there's two major ones, is I'm not attached to Krishna's energies or for my enjoyment or averse to them because they're making me uncomfortable. There isn't any attachment or aversion. That qualification has to be there. And the other qualification has to be there is that I'm seeing everything has its potential in the use of the service of the Lord. Then one can apply this principle. Otherwise, naturally, we're dealing from a platform of attachment and aversion. And dealing with Krishna's energies with a consciousness of attachment or aversion is what causes bewilderment. Itra dvesha samutena dvandva mohena bharata, Krishna says. One is born into the delusion of duality due to attachment and aversion, itra dvesha. So if one tries to interact with the energy in that way, he becomes entangled. But if one can interact with the understanding that this world is not false, it's not that it is false, because underlying this world is the absolute truth. So how can it be false? So it is not false, but rather the tendency to try to enjoy it is false, because that is not possible. Even when you try, it is not actually possible. So that has to be abandoned, anansakta shavishnya, and one has to have the understanding, bhoktaram jagnatapasam, sarvaloka maheshwaram. Krishna is the actual bhokta. And everything, including ourselves, we are the bhoga. Krishna is a bhokta, and we are the bhoga, meant for Krishna's enjoyment. So when we interact with the energies of the Lord with that understanding, then there's no question of being entangled in material affairs on account of that, on account of that strong service conception. Srila Prabhupada warns about this in the Nectar Devotion, that it may take some time to evolve the service ego that allows one to actually do that in a way that's not entangling. So it is possible, anyway, in context of what's going on in the storyline here, it is possible for Priyavrata to accept that situation and still maintain a renounced position. Not the image of renunciation he was maintaining, let's say, per se, but the real position of renunciation. Whatever Krishna wants, everything for his pleasure. All the jivas, all the energies, everything for Krishna's pleasure. That position of renunciation he can accept. And that way fulfill the order of both Narada Muni and of Lord Brahma. It must be fulfilled because the order of the Lord cannot be defied. So Lord Brahma is trying to help him mercifully see how to do that. So that's a nice point. That we may not be able to, due to insufficient, not insufficient maturity. You can be very mature and get bewildered, because Krishna says that in chapter 4 of Gita. I think you always quote this verse, that even great personalities get bewildered about what should be done, what should not be done. It is not extraordinary thing that can happen. But you see, the difference between ourselves and great souls is that they actually go to great personalities and just get it reconciled. And then that way their dilemma is easily solved. So that's what I can understand. That's my spontaneous discussion. And anyone wants to ask anything or comment, yeah.
Since this episode has started happening, I was wondering what the difference is between the refusal of the Kumaras and the refusal of Priyavrata to follow instruction.
Yeah, I don't know. Because I don't remember all the details of the Leela. Srila Prabhupada, I do remember Srila Prabhupada making a statement that there's only one instruction that a disciple can defy, and that's to get married. Srila Prabhupada does marry, but of course, you probably should be on the level of the Kumaras before you should think to do such things. So, I just remember that statement there. And it seems that in the Leela, well, let's see, yeah, because Lord Brahma is asking Kumaras to how do you say? Populate the universe as progenitors. And they're like, no, thank you. And here, what is being asked of Priyavrata? I haven't been here for all I didn't read all the verses carefully. I've read all the verses, I haven't read all the purports. So what is being asked of Priyavrata in terms of the responsibility he's being asked to take? The king of the next Manu of the entire universe. So I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. I would have to look at the past times carefully to try to give a proper conclusion. It's an interesting question. Anyone wants to try to? I haven't looked at the past times enough to try to give an answer confidently. Yeah. Yeah.
So to apologize that I missed my service. Seemingly there's no difference. Both are defined or very politely saying no. However, the operative principle is the Lord's will or the need of the hour. So when the Kumaras refuse, it is inspired by the Lord so that the appearance of Rudra can happen. And here it is being inspired by the Lord in such a way that Lord Brahma can speak essential truths for Priyavrata Maharaj to take on that service. So the seeming, before you ask the question, I was thinking of Arjuna. Arjuna also said the same thing, I want to renounce. Because if I fight this war, then I get entangled in 5 different ways. And yet he's being asked the same principles by which he should fight. So there is 4 Kumaras, there is Arjuna, and there is Maharaj. But ultimately it's the Lord's will as the higher circumstance that determines what's to be done or not to be done. So the Kumaras are not faulted for not following. Maharaj Priyavrata would be faulted, and so would Arjuna. So externally there
It's interesting because I was also thinking of Yadu, where his father Yayati asked him for his youth, and he also defied him for the service of Krishna, because he was thinking, I need my youth and my sex life. One reason is I want to get out of material existence quicker, and the other reason is it's going to be useful in facilitating the advent of the Supreme Lord. But in those cases, there wasn't like a very clear, like here with Priyavrata, he's got 3 Mahajans making it very clear, or at least 2 of them making it very clear, the desire of the Lord. And Arjuna's got the Lord speaking to him directly. And in Kumara's case, it's also, it seems like in Kumara's case and Yadu's case, it's like kind of like an inner inspiration that's indomitable and to manifest the will of the Lord. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, anyone else wants to say anything? Thank you.
is Priyavrata, is he already
He's a pure devotee, yes.
So,
Any other questions? Yes. Comments?
Hare Krishna. You were mentioning in your class about how the goal is to see all of Krishna's energies properly in relation to him and acting according to the need. So before we have such vision, how do we carefully protect ourselves from the tendency to
Yeah, I mentioned that kind of like a footnote at the end of the class, that Srila Prabhupada advises that one should not follow this principle without the guidance of the spiritual master. Because two things that are mentioned by our acharyas in this regard is that it requires a lot of honesty. That's the one dilemma. And it's very hard to sometimes honestly express one's various attachments. It's sometimes, or let's say most of the time, even hard to perceive a lot of our various attachments or how attached we are to them. Many times someone would have to kind of poke at it for us to actually realize how attached we are. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada advises that one should, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur rather, one should expose the inner workings of his mind to a proper authority. And that way, try to follow the principle under able guidance like that. Otherwise, we'll be defeated by the blind spots. We've heard it in that type of language before. Definitely, as conditioned souls, we're used to interacting with the energy on the platform of Bhoga and Tyaga. So we should take it for granted that that tendency doesn't die so easily because we've been interacting that way for many lifetimes. That's the whole reason why this whole Buddha Yoga topic is very bewildering for Arjuna. Because this is what the conditioned soul is used to doing. If I want something, I go for it, Bhoga. And if I don't like it, I don't go for it, Tyaga. That's what we've been doing. Now Krishna is saying, go for it, don't enjoy it, and at the same time don't renounce it. What? He's getting bewildered. That doesn't make sense. What makes sense is, if it's enjoyable, Bhoga. If it's not enjoyable, Tyaga. Krishna is saying, go for it, do your activity very dutifully, very vigilantly. Don't enjoy it. At the same time, if it's uncomfortable, don't renounce. How does that make sense? So then so many questions. Because living entity is not used to interacting in that way in the material world. So it is always good to have superior assistance, guidance, authority to help us ascertain, how to move around in the material world without getting trapped. Okay, that's how I can do. That's okay. Does anyone else want to say, add anything, ask anything? Yeah. Is what a perverted reflection?
Speculation. Because the soul by nature is full of knowledge, but in a conditioned state.
Yeah, he's covered.
So he's trying to rely on the mind. Is that a correct comparison? That would be a perverted reflection of his original position
of knowledge. Sure, yeah, one can say like that. In the material world, the soul is covered by the material energy, which includes the gross and subtle body. And then and it's on account of the subtle body that his material existence is perpetuated. And life after life, he's picking up various ideas and conceptions from every life and taking those along with him. And then, on one particular body, he'll try to combine various themes that he picked up from various lives. Prabhupada speaks about this in NOI 8. And he gets really bewildered to come to a state of freedom, to come to a state of knowledge. Mental speculation means the desire to come to a state of knowledge by the wrong method. The want to be knowledgeable is natural for the soul, that being his nature, as you're expressing. But to try to come to knowledge by the wrong method is what mental speculation is. Obviously, all of our ideas that we use for freedom are nicely gifted to us by the material energy. Well, what about this one? What about that one? These are her gifts. That's called the Prekshapatmika Shakti. Right? The Prekshapatmika Shakti of Maya means the energy of Maya which distracts the living entity from going back home back to Godhead. And our main instrument is the mind. That's the main instrument that's going to be used. And what happens is she distracts us by our mind perceiving duality and then giving us ideas how to deal with duality. And that way we remain absorbed in the temporary and we perpetuate our material existence. So then one has to lose, yeah, you can say that's a perverted reflection, the desire to know. So then rather than accept that method, we should accept the proper method of trying to know. That method is hearing from a more, a broader source of knowledge, namely Krishna.
I guess also coming to the conclusion, I can't know everything. Right? I mean,
Nah, I can't know everything. I can't know anything. We are bewildered by even the things that we think we know. You'll find this out a lot. That even some of our deepest convictions can be easily smashed by someone who's like super smart. They can present some word jugglery, and even our deepest convictions are completely smashed to smithereens. Right? Therefore, Mahaprabhu said, even if a Mahabhagavata hears a Sharirika Bhashya of Shankaracharya, he can fall down. A Mahabhagavata does mention. Prabhupada clearly mentions it. The verse also specifically says. So you'll discover that the things that we have the deepest convictions about, when we're not on a fully realized platform, fully surrendered to the absolute truth, then we can find that, do we really know? Someone can easily bewilder our position. If we're not fully realized in the absolute truth, we can easily get bewildered. So we may say, we hardly know anything. We don't even know what we should eat. It's a big dilemma, what to eat. Everyone goes to the lunch table and speculating. They say, well, this one is healthy for you. How do you know? No one knows. Just because it's green, it's healthy or something like that, or it says organic on it. Oh, it's healthy. Why? Because it's organic. But what if that thing is not proper for the body? No one knows. What do we know? We don't even know what to eat. We don't know how to sleep properly. Nothing.
Thank you. Appreciating that point, how that mental disturbance is one of my shaktis. Can you explain the other shakti? You often mention there's two different types of this Maya Shakti. That was one, the diverting.
The other one, the language I like a lot is the normalizing potency. Avaranatmika Shakti. What normalizes our existence in the material world. This is normal. You see, a guy and a girl kissing. Oh, very normal. This is a normal way of interacting. The worm in stools, eating nice stools. Anything is very normal. I'm enjoying life. This is called the normalizing potency of Maya. It is just like this. You walk into a room that smells really, really bad. At first, you're like, you get freak out. But then, like, after 10 minutes, you get used to it, right? And you don't even notice it anymore. You're just moving around, operating. You don't even notice the smell is there anymore. Isn't it? And then when you leave for some time and come back again, you will not, oh wow, the smell is actually quite bad. So like that, we're in the material energy for a long time, and Maya normalizes the experience from the material world. Indra took birth as a hog, and when Lord Brahma called him back to heaven, he said, don't you see what I got going on here? I got me a nice pig wife, I got me some piglet kids. Life is good. This is Maya. So this is how Maya engages the soul in the material world. First, she covers him with a misconception. Several misconceptions. And that's how his energy is going to start to be engaged. Energy is engaged according to conception. So she covers him with a misconception. And then after that, she makes sure that he's thoroughly distracted so that he will never inquire about his actual situation. And that's called the Patmika Shakti. First, get him engaged improperly by giving him misconceptions and keep him all the time distracted. Go, right? Mode to nature, Guru 5 Gita. Mode to nature don't let you rest within 5 seconds, right? As soon as you sit down to rest, and the mind starts to, and then you got to get up again, start running hither and thither, and then you sit down. Not even for 5 seconds, Maya's giving it a chance for you to just like, where do I make this go? to contemplate a higher situation. This is how she keeps us engaged. First, give us a misconception and keep us distracted. So misconception, that's Avaranatmika Shakti, normalize our existence in the material world. Patmika Shakti, keep us distracted. And that way, we're in the material world for a proper goal. Only the people who can get the mercy of the Mahan, just say, sit down. Here, here. And that way, by the mercy of this Shabda Brahman coming from the mouth of the pure devotee, there's some hope. Otherwise, there's no hope. No hope. We're so distracted, by the false flags, etc. Arguing
discussing the kind of natural or like normal reaction to the conditioned soul when he is seeing persons, engaged in sense gratification or, bewildered by samanartha. We criticize, we laugh or joke at the expense of the individual. But the devotee his heart is moved out of compassion for looking at the people who's bewildered. How can we cultivate that and do more of that? How would you do that? Yeah, how we laugh at the people, but actually it's heartbreaking. You said that word heartbreaking. Yeah, maybe you won't explain it so much as more. I can just pronounce it and sound heartbreaking.
So your question is how to develop more compassion?
Or
I mean, essentially, one has to be out of the
since you said that, I was